Welcome, everyone, to the Everyday Experts podcast. I am your host, Bobby, and I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, Heidi. Hello, Heidi.
Hello.
Mrs. Doubtfire is here. We are joined today by John Jennings. He is a business and leadership coach. He has over 2 decades of IT leadership with Fortune 500 companies like LG&E and the Yum brands. So he's worked with some pretty big companies. He's kind of a big deal, in case you didn't know. And he has developed a reputation over his career as a resilience coach. So that's kind of why we wanted to talk to him today about achieving your goals and, in a way, knowing how to cope with the idea that you might not reach your goals. And, we've all had that happen. We set a goal and we don't reach it. Oh, Heidi hasn't. She's achieved all of her goals.
All my goals.
Yeah.
That is a lie.
She's never experienced failure. But, you need to learn how to deal with failure in your goals. So that's why John is here today.
Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got to where you are now?
Well, sure. So great to be here. Good to see you guys. And yeah, I've been a business and leadership coach for almost 5 years now, after a pretty successful career, as you mentioned, in Fortune 500 companies, and then spent about 7 or 8 years more in the small business and startup community, and just achieved a number of goals, but also was not achieving some of my goals. And one of my goals all along was to have my own business. And a lot of things got in the way of that, but eventually got to a point where I decided that was something I definitely was going to do and wanted to do. And so started that out. And it's funny, a lot of this stuff will weave into this conversation because I started out achieving all my goals. I had a pathway. I had a business plan of 18 months to kind of getting to kind of this sustainable business, and then a growth path after that. And 18 months in was January of 2020.
Oh, no.
And we kind of know what happened in the first quarter of 2020. And
just a little blip.
Yeah, a little blip. And it derailed everything, and I almost lost my business, almost lost a lot of things, and lost my mom. Actually passed away right in the middle of all that. So had emotional things going on all over, and I really had to reset and rethink and reprioritize and all that kind of stuff, everything during that Q2 of 2020, and got back on track in Q3, and it's been great ever since. But I did not achieve my goals in Q1 or Q2 of 2020. I fell quite a bit short of them, like 80% short of them or something like that. But it was a great learning experience too. And we'll talk about, kind of what, when we don't achieve our goals, what that means and how we can bounce back from those things.
Yeah, of course.
So how do you talk to people about handling, like different ways to handle and process that feeling of not attaining those goals?
I first try not to talk about not attaining goals because, we don't even want that mindset. So we always first talk very, very positively about that. But inevitably, there's goals that aren't met, and you do have to deal with that. And so I always look to turn anything that doesn't work out the way you want into a gift. So there's kind of 3 ways you look at that. There's a gift of knowledge, right? You go through something and you learn from it. That, like your mama always told you, what are you going to learn from this, right? And so you learn from those things. And I certainly have tried to always do that whenever I didn't achieve the results I wanted. Second is a gift of strength. In other words, I love the Kelly Clarkson song, "What doesn't kill you make you stronger."
Big Kelly Clarkson fan.
Yeah, well, I am. But
It's a good song.
it's a
good message.
It's a great message. And so Q2 2020 didn't kill me, but it certainly made me stronger.
Yeah.
And so I certainly have come through that, stronger and smarter. And then the third is a gift of inspiration. And that's, I think, the most powerful, when you can take something that happened and then turn that into a gift of inspiration. In other words, inspiring you to do something more. And so I've had several things in my life that have, just either were demoralizing or were failures, or, one of the things I talk about are so many of the business owners I've worked with are in my past, miserable people, to put it simply.
Mhm.
They're unhappy, they're frustrated, they're mean spirited, all kinds of things. And owning your own business ought to be kind of the source of joy and fun and inspiration and all that kind of stuff. But so many business owners I work with aren't that way, or the ones that I worked for. And so, my goal is always to help my clients, the people I work with, enjoy what they're doing, and to get joy out of life, and joy out of their business, and joy out of their work. Because if you're not getting joy out of all the work that goes into running your own business, then something's wrong.
Mm.
Sure.
So that's been a kind of, when I talk about a gift of inspiration, I take those things from my past and try to leverage those into.
I love that. I've always said, like, find the silver lining.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
So I like the way you're describing that.
Yeah, it reminds me of
So,
that like famous Thomas Edison story where he would say like I haven't failed, I've just learned 1,000 ways
Yeah.
not to make a
not to do
light
it.
bulb.
I love that.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
that's a very positive sentiment, and I think it doesn't border on blind optimism, because sometimes people will go into that
Right.
mode
Mhm.
or denial, whatever. It's a learning experience. I think when you approach everything with this genuine curiosity
Mm-hmm.
and a desire to learn, you will find yourself much happier and able to grapple with failure.
Mhm.
So I like that
Absolutely.
approach. Yeah. So that fear of failure, I think, is often what keeps people from really not even pursuing big goals, but doing a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes to setting goals and pursuing them, how can people effectively move past that fear, or at least hold it at bay enough? Like, how do they manage that?
Yeah. So when I work with folks, we talk about the things that are going on in your head. The biggest thing that holds us back from success is that 6 inches between our ears, and and that
Getting in our own way.
we get in our own way, and we let our thoughts dominate. So I study a lot on emotional intelligence, positive intelligence, those sorts of things, and I know there are emotional things that go on inside our head. We have kind of two brains. We have our emotional brain,
Mhm.
the brain, that the part of the brain that, like, when you touch a hot stove, you pull your hand back, or
Yeah.
or when the car pulls out in front of you, you slam on the brakes. Our higher order, higher thinking brain doesn't come into play when those things happen. We just react. Well, hidden within that same part of the brain is that those voices that say things like, John, you can never build a business. Why would anybody buy anything from you? Or why would anybody listen to you? Or the kind of the hyper vigilant type person who's always looking for, well, if I do this, that might fail, and that might cause me to then lose my house, right? We can jump very quickly from, should I try this, to, oh, I could be bankrupt someday. We kind of we forget that there's like 14 steps and 14 things you can do to divert that along the way, but we jump to kind of the worst case scenario. And so these voices that live in our head, and there's several of them that we've identified through research. These voices are always telling us, we're not worthy, or we're going to screw up, or we're going to make these mistakes, and those things get in the way and prevent people from doing what they want to do. About a year ago, I was having a coffee meeting with a guy that I've known for 20 plus years, and he's a person of great faith, and we've talked about that through our relationship. And I remembered we were talking. I remembered that before I started my business, before I went out on my own, I actually had coffee with him, and we sat down. And I told him what I was thinking about doing, and we talked about that. And so he said, "Well, John, if you could go back, and today John could go back and meet with then John, as we're sitting there having coffee, what would you tell us?" And I said, "Well, I probably would say, boy, it's going to be a lot of fun, but this is the hardest thing you'll ever do professionally. And oh, by the way, just about the time you think you're got your feet under you, there's going to be this global pandemic,
Mm.
and then your mom's going to die, and then all these other things are going to happen, and you're going to almost lose everything, but then it will bounce back, and then you'll be okay." And we laughed about that, and then I said, check that, forget all that. I would not have wanted to know all that, because I know I then wouldn't have pursued this dream, and I wouldn't be doing the things I'm doing today. And so, I, it was those voices in our head will get in the way and stop us every time. And so we have to learn how to recognize them and not listen to them. Realize that, okay, they're a warning. Maybe they're something to think about. And I had a very detailed plan because I'm a very vigilant person, but I was careful not to let that go overboard.
You actually made me think of something that I guess I find ironic. If you had been able to go back in the past, tell yourself all those things, and then you knew what was going to happen before it happened, I think you, and not just you specifically, but most people would end up spending more time and energy than maybe they should trying to circumvent all those things that they've heard about. And it ends up kind of producing the same effect. You're still being held back. So if that's any weird comfort to you, like even if you knew what was going to happen, unless it wasn't 100% perfect, you'd probably still think, I got to prevent the bad things from happening. Now I know what's going to happen. I can stop it. And you still won't pursue your goals and
And just
probably won't reach
different
them.
bad things,
Yeah,
different good things,
exactly.
different,
Yeah.
different.
That's time travel
What is that?
101.
A right? That's the butterfly effect.
The
Is that what
butterfly
that's called?
effect. Yeah. Fantastic short story. Is that what that?
Uh,
Maybe.
uh,
Anyway,
it's
we're wandering into territory we are not well versed in.
well. You mentioned, you know, not getting in your own way and not listening to those negative thoughts, but taking it to the flip side, sort of. At what point do people need to realize, this goal needs to be adjusted? So I don't want to completely ignore all the negative thoughts. How do you guide someone through weeding out and paying attention, and when do they need to adjust?
Well, sure. And so, when you're setting goals, first, you need to, let's take a step back for a second. So when you're setting goals, you really want to look at things like, what's my vision for where I want to be, where I'm at today, what are my values, what are those core values that are going to shape and guide me along the way. And that way we're creating goals that are very much aligned with who we want to be and where we want to be. And I don't know if you know the phrase SMART goals. SMART
Hmm.
goals are
Yeah.
specific and measurable and attainable and relatable and time bound.
Mm-hmm.
So, we if we have those SMART goals that are really aligned and related to our vision and values and that sort of thing, then they're good goals. They're goals worth having. Now, are they attainable? Well, that's if they're not, then you've got a problem. But also, they can't be too easy as well. We know that, so they always need to be kind of that stretch kind of thing. But so we set goals and then we set out towards them, and one of a couple things happen. So I work with a lot of entrepreneurial clients, and a lot of entrepreneurs cannot stay focused. They have that restless bug in them that they lose interest in things that are longer play sometimes, and so we have to kind of chunk those goals up into smaller pieces so that we can show that we're making progress every week or every month or no bigger than every quarter, just so that we're constantly reminding ourselves of making progress towards those goals. Because that's one of the biggest things I see people, they just lose interest, they lose focus, and they start wandering. The second thing is things get in the way. I mean, COVID was a huge example. Things get in the way of achieving our goals. We fall a little short. And when we do that, my question to people is that still a good goal? Is, if let's say you wanted to lose 50 pounds, is this, and you've only lost 30, is it still a good goal to lose that other 20? Or let's say you want to grow your business, 25%, and you've only grown at 10%. Is it still a good goal to grow 25%? And 9 times out of 10, probably 99 times out of 100, the goal is still good. The goal is still valid. It's just they haven't achieved it from a time standpoint. It's like on the SMART thing, they've done everything but the T. And so then we just look as, okay, well, what's a realistic time frame now? Do we need to add 6 more months onto this goal, or 3 more months, or whatever that might look like? So I always say don't eliminate the goal, just adjust it to what's more realistic. And time is the most common one that we adjust.
Yeah.
How often do you recommend people reevaluate their goals?
So, from the standpoint professionally with my clients, we normally at least once a quarter, we'll
Okay.
refresh and think about our goals
Mhm.
and see what our progress is. Companies that are fast moving and have a lot of challenges should be on top of their goals, every week, at least making steps towards them and knowing what those steps are. And that's, part of what I do with clients. But yeah, if you're not working towards them every week, then you will find yourself slowly drifting away from that goal.
Mhm.
And so that's pretty critical.
What about when somebody has not achieved a goal, given up on it, but then come back to it? How would you recommend people go about, processing the fact that this is I guess there would be, let me back it up a bit. I would imagine there would be some residual fear from setting the goal in the first place and then not achieving it. So you don't now have the fear of failure, you now have the memory of failure.
Mhm.
How do you get past that and then restart your goal? Like the thing that I keep thinking about is losing weight. For a lot of people, that is a recurring goal. It's a recurring thing that they try to jumpstart again and just can't seem to keep it going.
Yeah, and I actually did that about 6 years ago after several years of failing
Yeah.
at doing it. And I had to kind of go back and rethink why I wanted to lose that weight.
Mhm.
And it was more than just, oh, I want to look better, or oh, I want to fit in my clothes. It was health reasons and other things that came into play. So there were other drivers that came into
Yeah.
play, and I took a different tactic. So back to that, looking at it from a gift, you look at that previous failure and what have you learned from it?
Yeah.
How have you improved? How are you stronger? What is it? What does it make you want to do different this time? And so, restarting, rebooting, you know, is not uncommon in business and in life and everything else. I mean, failed relationships, failed weight loss programs, whatever it might be, we often have to reboot and start over. And so hopefully you've learned something from it. So you take that gift of knowledge and experience and strength and all that, and you might re-envision that goal a little bit. You might
Mhm.
rethink what the end product will look like, or why you're pursuing it. What's your driving
Yeah.
force behind it, and that sort of thing.
Yeah, so in some cases it might be wiser to kind of hit the reboot button and give yourself kind of a fresh perspective. I've seen people get obsessive over where they want something to end up, how they want something to happen, and it might not be realistic. And they might be missing out on a really good opportunity in a slightly different direction, but they're unwilling to waver from, and I guess we've all done that in different areas of our lives.
Hmm.
So it sounds like in some cases, resetting is actually the smart thing to do.
Yeah, and sometimes scaling back those goals if they weren't realistic. I had a client that had some very aggressive goals for 2020, and going into that, we were expecting this great year, and none of that happened.
Mm.
And so it was then a process of stepping back and saying, let's create goals for the next year that are a little more realistic, a
Hmm.
little more down to earth. Because what had happened, they had had great years of growth in 2018 and 2019, and they were just expecting to, just explode in 2020. They got the bad timing award
Yeah.
for their growth pattern, and so they had to scale back. They had to step back and eventually, we still want to get to where we want to get to there, but it's going to take this year, probably next year, to get to where they thought they were going to be in 2020.
Yeah. So, speaking of realistic goals, that actually brings me to the next thing I wanted to ask. A lot of goals, without even realizing it, are kind of dead in the water before you even get them started. How can people avoid some of the pitfalls of goal setting just in that initial planning stage?
So we talk about, you know, goals need to be attainable, but also they need to be a challenge, and
Yeah,
it's that sweet spot is always the challenge.
it's such a hard
If
spot to
if
find.
you
Yeah.
if you set it too small, people don't people don't get excited about it. But if you set it too big, a lot of times people will say, well, gosh, I'll never be able to achieve it, so why even try?
Right.
And so you got to find that sweet spot first. And so that's one of the things. The other thing, and I often use that, that analogy, how you eat an elephant. You know how you eat an elephant, right?
One bite at a time.
One bite at a time.
It's
And
sad that I know that expression.
and so you have to, if your goal is an elephant, then you have to be able to break it up into parts that people can see are attainable. So if you say, oh, our goal is to, triple the size of our company, and people are sitting there going, that's not even possible. If you sit there and say, well, what if we increased it 10% this quarter?
Yeah.
Oh, I could do that. And so you figure out what those chunks are that people can bite into, that people can get excited about and feel like they can attain. I set my goals on a quarterly basis because I can have a really good month and then I can have not so good a month. And so if I put it into quarterly chunks, I know that usually they're going to average out. So I don't get too excited about a good month. I don't get too upset about a less than ideal month overall. And so that's one of the ways I do it. I try to have it realistic but stretch goals. My wife is always saying, you set your goals too high. I'm like, well, no, if they're not challenging me, then I'm not going to push myself. But I also don't want to push myself too far or too, that I get off kilter and get my, out of alignment of other things. So it's finding that right balance is important.
And you've mentioned a few of the barriers along the way that people encounter, like their fears, the loss of focus, needing to break it down into small chunks. What do you see as the biggest barriers that people encounter? Are those the biggest barriers?
I think they are. I think without a doubt the loss of focus is the biggest one. I was with a client not long ago, and it was, this year we're going to be focused. We're going to stay on track. We're not going to get distracted. We are going to stay relentlessly focused on these three things and nothing else. And I mean, adamant about it. And then it's, I got to head to the airport. So where are you going? Oh, I'm going to Phoenix. What are you doing in Phoenix? Well, there's a new opportunity there I'm looking at. Is that part of these three we just talked about? No, but this is different. And so we justify, we got that restless entrepreneurial spirit will always justify that by, but if I'm not constantly challenging us, then, we'll just grow stale and die. And no. So it was just funny that we were literally wrapping up this conversation about staying relentlessly focused on these three areas. And then immediately he was leaving for the airport to go chase something else.
Well, this new thing starts this next week.
Yeah.
I'll start it next week.
It's always, but that's different.
Yeah.
I get that. That's different. I hear that a lot.
I'll start eating healthy Monday.
Exactly.
Back to my wings.
Exactly. And I think, I use my weight loss example sometimes when I talk about folks. I used to just say, well, I'm gonna eat less. I'm gonna do this, gonna do that. And I finally decided, for health reasons, other thing, I just had to do something. And so I set a goal of hitting my BMI number, which was 50 pounds. And I don't remember if I had a specific time goal, but that was my goal. And I decided, there were 3 or 4 key things I needed to do, and I needed to cut out carbs. I needed to, not all carbs. I tried that once and it didn't. I found that cutting out, going completely low carb was impossible, but we decided, okay, we can cut out, I call it ancillary breads,
Sure.
If I'm eating a hamburger, it's got to have a bun, but I don't necessarily have to have a crescent roll or a biscuit with every meal, so that was one of the things. I had cut out soft drinks. I started drinking more water, and I started, doing
That's a big one.
started doing some exercise, and not a lot of exercise, just enough to kind of stay active. And sure enough, and portion control. There was 5 things, and I just, I decided no more seconds.
Yeah.
So I started, like I would pile my plate up,
I'm not allowed to go back.
I'm not
So
allowed
here
to
we
go.
go.
I'm not allowed to go back. So I'm going to make this first course, a doozy. But over time, that plate got smaller and smaller. But those were kind of the things that I said, if I can just do these things, and they were all reasonable, they were all attainable, but that they were all a little bit of a sacrifice, right?
Sure.
And then I started measuring. I didn't hop on the scales every day, but I hopped on the scales every couple of weeks. And first time I hopped on the scale, they were down a few pounds. I went, maybe this will work. And then I never will forget. It was like a couple of months into it. I hopped on the scales and like 10 pounds had fallen off in 2 weeks. And I'm like, wow, this is actually working, and then that gave me that momentum to keep doing and keep doing. And the cool thing is, it took me about 9 months. I lost all that, hit my BMI, couldn't maintain it.
Yeah.
I'm about 8 or 9 pounds over it now, but I'm a lot healthier than I was. And all of those things that we did then, I still do today. So I built good habits that have stuck with me
I think
since
that's
then.
why measurable goals are so important, because if you can see how you have progressed, even if it's small, that helps motivate you to keep going.
Yeah.
But what you were saying sounds a lot like, we've been talking a lot about weight loss, which is most people's New Year's resolutions,
Yeah. It's a
right?
common one.
So do you see a difference between resolutions and goals?
Yeah, I do. I think resolutions are more about pledging, a promise to yourself to do something different, whether that's, eating less or exercising more or being nicer to people or whatever, they're promises to yourself. And I think that's the reason most go unmet. I think there's some like within like 2 weeks or
I think I
something.
think it's like by the end of February, like 90 something percent of people. I'm making up that statistic. That might not be right, but it's astronomical. It's like almost all New Year's resolutions are done
Yeah.
by February.
Yeah. And I think it's like half of them are like done in the first week.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
not
yeah.
anymore, because they're gonna listen to this podcast
Yeah,
and they're gonna be
exactly.
like, "No, no, we're gonna keep on
We're
going."
gonna
Yeah.
keep on going. Yeah,
Yeah, and so I would say instead of just a resolution, and sometimes I'll tie resolutions in with goals. Let's actually make it more of a goal.
yeah,
A resolution with a goal at the end of it that says, okay, yeah, I'm gonna eat better, or I'm gonna exercise more, but I'm doing that with the goal of achieving this by a certain date, and then you can
right.
measure that progress. You can, whether it's on the scale or whatever. Because if you just say I'm gonna start getting up earlier, well, the first time you don't, you feel like, okay, well, I didn't
Yes.
achieve it, and then it's like
Yep.
it's a lot easier than to sleep in the next
Yeah.
day and the next day.
It's a spiral.
Yeah,
Definitely seen that happen.
yeah.
Do you recommend people, I mean, obviously they need to write this down and keep this somehow so they can see it to revisit it and keep track. Do you recommend journaling? What do you recommend?
I do like journaling. Here's my journal right there.
Okay.
I do like journaling. There's a recommendation I learned from Brian Tracy, who's an author and sales coach from several years ago. But he always says you should write your goals down in with not not in a Word document or whatever, but write them down by hand every day. Now I'm not that dedicated,
That sounds
but
tedious.
if you have a especially a very important goal, going back and revisiting that and writing it down, and also not just writing it down, but writing it in the future
10?
present but future tense. And what I mean by that is saying, instead of saying I'm going to lose 50 pounds, I will have lost 50 pounds, or I have lost 50
Right,
pounds,
right.
or I reach this weight, or I do this, and you start thinking about yourself in that context, but writing down your goals, writing down, so I don't write them every day, but I do keep a kind of a weekly to-do list, if you will. That's oversimplifying it, but they are all things that tie to my goals and things that I need to do this week that will lead to achieving my goals. So I revisit that usually every Sunday night before the week starts. It's kind of part of my routine of kind of getting ready for the week. I think about the things I need to do that are going to propel me towards my goals. And then I get that one, writing them down. So it makes that connection of all the different senses. And then of course you get that opportunity to then strike them off or check them off or whatever you do. That gives you that kind of endorphins of, achieving different things and getting things done.
Mhm.
Yeah. Do you ever find that it's detrimental for somebody to get off to a fast start reaching their goals? Because you reminded me of something that happened a couple years ago when like I was trying to lose weight. Like I got off to a really fast start because it was like one of those major diet changes, and it's one of those areas of your body, I guess, where the change was so drastic that, ended up dropping a lot of weight really quickly. But it's hard in my case, it was hard, really impossible to keep up that momentum.
Mm.
So in a way, not being able to keep that pace kind of discouraged me. Do you find that's detrimental to people reaching their goals, or can people, come down off of that high a little bit better?
Yeah, I think it's never bad to get off to a fast start, right? I mean,
Yeah.
if you have some success early, great, but what usually happens is then, or what may happen, is that you might then kind of assume that it's always going to be that easy.
Right. Yeah.
We talk about in starting a business, there's a we call it the sigmoid curve. It's the business growth curve, and so almost every business that starts shoots up initially. I mean, I gained my first 3 clients in like the first 2 weeks of my business, and I'm like, wow, this is going to be easy, And then we call that the honeymoon trap.
Yeah.
You think, oh, this is going to be easy. This is, and it's not, right? I got my first 3 clients in the first month of business. I didn't see another new client for like 6 months. that was a little bit of a shell shock.
Yeah.
And so we usually see a business or anything take off and then fall. So I think goal setting the same thing can happen, right? We can get started and we feel great about it, and then other things start to happen, and you have to just maintain that momentum. You have to just keep going through it, but know that you're not always going to be able to keep this fast start.
Right.
It's not going to continue at that pace. So you have to learn not to be discouraged when it slows down, or when you suddenly picked up a couple of pounds and you go, why did that happen?
Yeah.
Well,
And that's, I would imagine that's where it comes in handy to write your goals down and remind yourself of your vision and use all the tools that we talked about
right.
to keep you focused on your goals.
Yeah.
Are there any other tricks that you recommend people try, like, the journaling and writing it down and revisiting it by the week? Are there any apps that you have found that are super helpful? Or, like, I would imagine having, well, I say this, but, like when everybody started with their Fitbits or their smartwatches and it would remind you to do
Mhm.
things, or, although I will say, often I would get like, I don't have time to stand up, leave me alone, turn it off.
You mind your business, Fitbit.
You're not in charge of me. But are there any you have found that are helpful?
I've experimented with a few things. I haven't really found anything that was like
Okay.
super. It's pretty basic, It's just
Getting into that good habit and
it is developing those habits. I would say if a using I would say using reminder tools like your watch and like your schedule on your phone, and reminders on your phone and stuff like that are all valuable tools to help make it stick, right? Anything that will remind you and keep it front of mind
actually
is a good
writing
thing.
it on your calendar that you're gonna do this on such and such day, yeah, that could be helpful. How many times is it that you need to do something till it becomes a true
Oh
habit?
gosh,
What
is
is
it
that?
So
2 or 3 weeks?
no, so it's really 6 weeks or
Oh.
more. Yeah, that 2 to 3 week thing, that you'll forget it in 2 to 3 weeks as
Well,
well.
I feel bad. I think
Um,
we inadvertently lied to our audience during a previous episode.
well,
Ah,
I think
there
I said 2 to 3 weeks. I've heard.
well, and I'm sure
but now we
it's
have the
been
extra.
there are
Oops.
people who have said that, but there's a good book called Atomic Habits by James Clear that talks about the importance. Now he actually I love that book, but he also really kind of poo-poos goals, and because he says it's really all about habits. I think
It can be both.
it's both.
Yeah.
I like developing goals and then developing those habits, like drinking more water and not going for seconds and stuff like that. To me, those
Right.
are habits that led to me achieving my goals, and
Mhm.
so I think they can live together.
That makes sense.
And so there's some things like that, but I find that just when the tactile aspect of writing things, if you think about it, it's involving your eyes and in your
Like your
hand,
motor
Mhm.
skills.
your motor
Yeah.
skill, everything. You remember more when you do that. Last night preparing for this, I wrote some notes down. I haven't had to go back and look at any of those notes. Why? Because I wrote them,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
because I hand wrote them, I'm more apt to remember them.
Yeah, of course.
That and that's just part of, I think, a technique to help keep it front of mind always.
Yeah, I like how much you've been talking about developing habits that will kind of set you up for success. My first job out of college was in radio advertising sales in a small town called Sylacauga, Alabama.
Mm.
And sales wasn't really my thing, but my sales manager there, his name is Lenny, he actually taught me quite a few things that I think are applicable to life. And one of the things that always stuck out to me was that you can adjust your mindset by changing your behaviors first.
Hmm.
And that was like a really novel concept to me at the time, as a young 20 something year old, thinking like, oh, so you don't have to like be in a perfect mindset to then just have everything fall into place during your day. You have to be intentional about these little habits, these little things you might start your day with.
And the way you talk to yourself, like you were saying when
Yes.
you're writing down your goals, like, own it, and
Yeah,
so you have to switch
absolutely.
your mindset. It's like, "I'm not one day going to do this. No, I am doing this. I
Right.
am working on it." It's go when you have a failure, that happened, moving on.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not gonna let it stop me.
And when I started my business, like I said, I got a few small clients out of the gate, but you know, that wasn't going to keep me busy. And I could have
Right.
easily spent all my time in my upstairs office, over the garage by myself, you know, planning and thinking. But I spent most of my time hanging out at, a coffee shop where I knew other business owners and people hung out. And that kind of became my office for the first, 6 to 12 months, because I just wanted to constantly be out in front of people. And it kept me, it was, kind of like, I really hate fake it till you make it. I don't like
I don't
that.
I don't like that
I
either.
don't like it, but in a way it is kind of what you're doing. It's like I am playing the role of this business owner that's out talking to people, even if they're not paying me yet, you know.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I'm going to be out talking to people and telling people what I do and why I do it and why I love it and why I want to
Of
make a
course.
difference in
Yeah.
people's lives and all that kind of stuff, and telling it as if I'm doing it because someday I want it to actually be true.
Yeah. Two things. One, I've heard a variation of that phrase that I like better, fail it till you nail it. That
Okay.
I like that one much better. But you're right, the fake it till you make it thing, like I kind of understand, where people are coming from with that. And it sounds like it's never a bad idea to start thinking outside the box as you are adjusting your goals, because I mean, you just said it perfectly. It's so easy to almost like retreat into that comfort zone or that place you think you should be
Hmm.
for achieving your goals and be blind to other possibilities. You took a little bit more of a risk, not, or what some people might perceive as a risk, not planning more and figuring out the answers, and instead you started building those habits that built you good connections, and you faked it till you made it,
Hmm.
and that ended up paying off really well.
Well,
So
there's another tool coming out soon, right? Is there a book? Did I hear about a book?
There is a book coming out. Uh,
what? Brand new information. We
well,
talked about it before the show.
yeah, I've dreamt of writing for a long time. I like writing. I blog. I used to blog a lot when I was starting the business out and had a lot of free time. Now I've
Sure.
got clients to keep me busy, and so I don't blog as often. But my wife has always encouraged me to be a writer. She's like, "You ought to write a book. You ought to write a book." And so, back in 2020, when things kind of fell apart, I actually, that was one of the things I did. I said, hey, no one, it's COVID, we're all locked down. And so I actually started writing the book then and wrote a big chunk of it back during that time. And so it's a book for business owners and for leaders. So y'all haven't even heard the title, so I'm gonna tell you the title.
Okay.
So the title is "Your Baby Is Ugly,"
Oh.
and there's so many times I'm sitting across a business owner or a leader who's struggling through things, and there's that aha moment where they realize they've got a problem. And I often will say, I know I just felt like I told you your baby's ugly, but we can we can work through this. And so it is kind of tongue in cheek to kind of capture your attention. I'm launching that in April, but yeah, it's just stories from my life and career of different situations, like, when your business model won't expand. I've been in several of situations where the business model just won't work, and people are passionate about it. They love it. They want it to work, but it just won't work. And you have to kind of step back and reinvent it. There's times your culture is completely broken and you need to really take a look there. There's, your sales team, probably the pipeline isn't as good as they're telling you, and things like that. So I walk through several different, actually 10 different scenarios that are common for business owners where they kind of realize things aren't as great as they could be. And then we talk about solutions for that and ways to approach it.
Yeah.
So
When will it be coming out?
we don't have a firm date, but it's looking to publish in April of 2023. That's where we are right now, right?
Okay.
And so pre-orders will probably be coming out probably in February, something like that.
So we could put that link below. Once we know that link, we'll add that.
Be on
You
the
can come back and
lookout
look.
for be on the lookout for some stuff on social media about
Yeah.
that. You all are required legally now to pre-order John's book. Now that
Absolutely.
you've listened to this podcast.
Absolutely. And
And the inside scoop is what you have.
yeah. And so I'm on social media. John K. Jennings is usually where you'll find me on LinkedIn or other
So if
platforms.
someone wanted to reach out to you for help, that's where they would go?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes,
So
help with business coaching or moving a couch or cooking.
I've done all the above. Cooking, grilling, maybe.
Yeah, there you go.
But,
John will grill you a steak and tell you that your business idea is terrible.
no,
he
no,
won't.
no.
No,
Baby is ugly.
It's ugly, but it can always be made. We can always make it cuter.
Yeah,
We can
exactly.
always bring
So what's the name of? Do you have a name for your business, or is it?
So my business is called Inspired Business Concepts.
Okay.
I use kind of the brand Inspire You, like Inspire You, the university.
Yeah.
So I'm inspiring you to lead, inspiring you to grow, inspiring you to achieve your results. And so I'm part of an international coaching organization called Focal Point that's been around for 20 years, and part of a group of about 250 coaches from around the world.
Yeah.
And I get a lot of inspiration and encouragement from that as well. But they're they're just part of our broader team.
Okay, excellent. Well, John, thank you so much for coming onto the show and sharing some tips for people on achieving their goals. I know that's kind of a sore subject for some people, and there's even a lot of fear associated with just setting a goal in the first place. Not even like, oh, well, I might not lose weight like I want to. It's more like I literally can't get anything to ever work, so I'm just not even going to try. So hopefully some of the things that you guys have heard John share today will help you feel empowered to reach for those lofty goals, but reach for them in attainable chunks. So, John, it's been a pleasure. You've given some great insight.
Thanks, Bobby. I enjoyed it. And on that last note, when someone says they don't want to set a goal, I just simply ask, if you don't start, will you ever attain it? And that's usually a showstopper. If you don't start somewhere, you're never going to get there. And so I hopefully this will help some folks get moving in the right direction.
Mm-hmm.
I actually quite agree with the phrase you just used. That is a showstopper. So I think we'll stop the show right there.
Goodbye.
Hey guys, thanks so much for listening. If you know an everyday expert that you think we should talk to, leave a comment below or send a message to the email address in the description. If you're an expert yourself, we want to talk to you too. And be sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram to get more awesome content and updates on future episodes. See you next time.